See if I can do this here. We got quite a few people. I don't think all 50 of you guys made it. I guess we need to quit doing a wait list and just let everybody show up. And I do want to get a picture of us in our new digs here, so you can all say cheese. Okay, pizza then. Cheese pizza, huh? You didn't know you were going to be. I'll probably push that out to a little bit later. Well, welcome to this month's DFW AngularJS Meetup. And this month we're being sponsored by Calcomi. Where's Jason at? I don't see him. But he was kind enough to step up and say, hey, we'd love to have you guys here. He's been big in the Microsoft user groups, and he used to run a couple of large ones, and he was really excited about having us all come here. So as always, if they're always looking for developers, so his email address is up on the board over there if you guys are interested. And then I did have another one. There's been a couple of people that have approached me that are actually looking for developers, front-end developers. And if you go out to the Meetup site, there and look in the forums, there's a couple of postings out there. So if you are looking for, you're looking for another job, or you're looking for something a little bit different, go out there and check out some of the links. Is there anybody here that's got anything that they want to bring up as far as open positions or a project that you're working on or anything like that before we get started?
We are looking for back-end PHP guys.
Back-end PHP guys? Okay.
Taylor Publishing.
Taylor Publishing? Okay. Sorry, I can't help you. I don't know anything about PHP.
I understand, and I just didn't expect, but by the same token.
You're looking, okay. And here's Jason back here. So if you guys are interested in finding out what he's got available, check with him after the meeting. Like he said, they're always looking for good devs. So tonight we're going to talk about integrating third-party authentication in your AngularJS application. And this basically, I'm taking it right straight out of my book. If you haven't seen it, there's a whole section in there about using Google Plus and Facebook authentication. Why would you want to use third-party authentication? The two things that first come to mind is, one, you want to use the third-party APIs, and your client is going to have to authenticate with it, like if you want to access their calendar or you want to store files. You might also want to reduce the amount of data you have to manage, because one of the things, if you have to manage a person's information, their passwords and their email address and all that, it becomes kind of a pain in the butt to have to deal with hashing the passwords and having a breach. By using third-party authentication or single sign-on from another site, you can eliminate a lot of that and just keep maybe the vital information back to the third. Actually have an integration where you have different customers that come from different places, and you want to authenticate back to their partner or something like that. So you might also need to use third-party authentication. And a good example, I don't know if anybody remembers this, back in 2008, 2009, when there was this big push for single sign-on, and you had the federations between and all that OAuth movement. Twitter, you've got OAuth to Facebook, you got OAuth to Google Plus. There's not one single entity, and that might actually be a business proposition if you really wanted to get into it. You could come up with the single sign-on domain to rule them all. It does exist, but how often do you use it?
I do it all the time. Yeah, because every time you go to an enterprise app, you want to bring on customers. You don't plugging right into it. So you federated identity.
Well, yeah, I mean, but a lot of times, you know, there's, if you think about it, besides you're doing the business-to-business authentication, which is a good reason to use it. But I mean, if you think about how many different passwords you use on a different day and you go to a different site, there's still not one single store that, you know, one password, unless you want to give everybody your access to your Facebook or your Twitter, which I'm not that way. That's why I have a password store, and I'll let it remember 200 different passwords for me. So we'll just kind of go over the high integration steps. For what we're going to be using today, Google Plus and Facebook, the first thing you're going to have to do is go out and register as a developer. And then you're going to create an app on their developer portal. And we'll go through that. And then the easiest thing to do is to take their JavaScript library, if they do have a JavaScript library, and wrap it inside an Angular service. That's the quickest, simplest way to do it. If all they have is a REST API that you need to actually access, then you're going to do a little bit more work by using you know, the $ HTTP service and making the REST calls, parsing the data and stuff like that.
Now, is this only authentication, or is it also dealing with authorization?
This is only authentication. You want to do more?
Yeah.
Well, you can. If you wanted to do more as far as authorization, you could get the claims back, right? And actually, we're going to kind of talk about some of the privileges that you're going to request with your application when you actually go present and ask the token, and that will give you more privileges so that you can see authorization from that perspective. But as far as them presenting you claims back, this really isn't going to dig into that too much, but we can look at points where that would help. And then we're going to basically take whatever service we create, and we're going to integrate that into our authentication piece. And I've got a very simple one that we're going to go through here. I've taken out just the third-party authentication piece and moved those services out into their own little service or their own little project so you can play with it up on GitHub. But what we did with the sample from the book is that you had different buttons, and the login controller would automatically kick off messages to the different authentication backends. So that's pretty much it for slides. So everything else is going to be code and demos. So let me switch over here, and we're going to start out with Google. And this is the Google developer console, and I don't know if I can make this any bigger. Oh, here we go. Let's make it bigger. Hopefully everybody can see that in the back. So I've got a couple of projects here. We're going to create a new project so you can see an idea of it. And you basically register in, you can sign up with Google as a developer as long as you have a Google Plus account. It's pretty easy to get, but we're going to start up with a project, and we're going to just call this sample app. They'll give you a project ID, and you can change that if you want to. We're just going to go ahead, and I'm going to just create this because what we're really interested in when I thought it did create. Let's see. Let's refresh. Well, where'd my project go? Oh, here it goes. He's still thinking. Okay, so we're going to go into sample app, and we're going to go to APIs and auths. And the first thing we want to do is we want to select at least the Google Plus API down here, if I can find it. Let's see. Oh, where is it? Oh, there it is, Google Plus API. So it's enabling that. And I think that's about all we really need, because all we're going to do is authorization. So we want to make sure that shows up as on here. And then we're going to go set up some credentials. So by default, we're going to need to create a new client ID here for OAuth. So we'll go ahead and do that. And we tell it what type we're going to do. We're going to do a web application, because a lot of my examples are how to do this on the client side. You could also do this as a service account where you've got a back-end app that is going to make API calls back and forth. So you can do it either way. And the example in the book does it by a web application as well. So we're going to do it that way. We'll go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and configure the consent screen. Let's see. We'll use my email and we'll say Jim sample auth app. And my homepage is going to be, let's see, we'll put Coding Smackdown in here. And I don't have a logo. I don't have a privacy URL, so we'll go ahead and save that. And then we'll go back to credentials here. Okay, so they want to know an origin that we're going to use. For this, I'm going to actually put in localhost colon 9001. You can actually set up different client IDs for your different environments. So as you're developing, create one for your local host at port 9001 or whatever you're running on. And you can do HTTP or HTTPS. Just so happens my sample app is set to localhost 9001. That's why I'm using it. But whatever you use it on your local environment, if you've got a preview, a server that you're going to run on, or you've got a staging server or production server, you'd go ahead and you'd create a different set of client IDs for each one of the servers. That's correct. And well, you should always use HTTPS for everything, right? Except for probably your development environment. Matter of fact, I think Google's even getting harsher with everybody. I noticed lately that they start showing up in Chrome if you're not doing stuff over HTTPS. They're really quick to kind of show those as warnings and stuff, which I think it's probably the best thing to do anyway. Never enter credentials over HTTP, and never provide anybody that. But what we end up with is a client ID and an email address and a secret. We're going to actually want this client ID when we get a little bit farther down the road. So for right now, we're going to leave this here. You can actually download it. You can download the JSON, but we'll just leave it up here. If you're interested in learning more about the Google Plus authentication platform, if you go out to developers.google.com/plus/web, actually just /plus will be all about the Google Plus API for iOS, for Android, and for the web. But there's some basic things you can do just for sign up. You can actually do you can have rendered a button with JavaScript, so they'll render a button with all the proper branding and everything. And but you can also just provide an image and then work off of that. They show a client-side flow and server-side flow, and you can also monitor the session state. They get into it a lot deeper than I'm going to dig in here because of the limited time. But they have everything that you can also specify different. Let's see if I can actually find it in here. It's the privileges is what I want to look for. Let's see. Permissions here. So they have different scopes that you're going to use. By default, we need at least the plus.login scope. And let me make this a little bit bigger. So you need at least the plus.login scope that they're showing here. And if you're going to do additional things, like if you're going to interact with different APIs, like maybe the person's calendar, or maybe do post to Google Plus or something like that, there's additional scopes that you can add. And you basically just send them, when we do the sign-in, you provide a list, like an array of scopes that you want. And you'll see an example of this when we get into the code. And it's about pretty much, I'm going to dig into this unless somebody has some other questions about it. So let's jump over and let's look at the Facebook developer site. So again, you can go to developers.facebook.com, and using your Facebook account, you can sign up for a developer account. An app just for, again, authentication with Facebook, so that basically somebody can use they can use their Facebook account to log into our site. So we need to pick a platform. So we're going to pick a website. Come on. And no, I don't want that. Oh, choose an existing app or type a name for a new app. Okay, so and we're going to create a new Facebook app ID, Jim's Sample Auth app. Okay. No, it's not a test version, and the category is going to be, I will just put it in entertainment, because this is probably very entertaining to everybody that's watching us. They're probably laughing like crazy. Okay, so we're going to go through here. We got basically we're going to set up the site of our URL, and again, now Facebook only has one URL per app. So what you have to do with Facebook is, if you're doing development, you set your URL up to your local machine, and then when you're ready to go to your preview environment, you either create a whole new app, or you come back and you change the URL for your app to move it to your preview environment or your test environment. And then when you go to production, you come back and you do the same thing. So so we're going to go ahead and we'll put in our URL here. Just the URL is all you need. You can do several different apps for the same domain. I'm not 100% sure, really, to tell you the truth. They may block you out on it, because I think what they want to do is they want to tie a URL to an app, so that they have one neck to ring if you cause problem in their environment. So I'm sure they probably won't allow you to do more than one. Okay, and then it's like test your integration. We're pretty much done with that. So let's see here. This basically just takes you to what you need to do Facebook login, which they have a full JavaScript library that is very simple to use. You start out with fb.init, and you provide your client ID and some parameters, and then it'll initialize the library, and then you can do .login to do your login. We're going to go through that a little bit later here. So what I want to do is go back to my apps, because we're going to actually need we're going to need our app ID when we get going. So all right, so let's get into some code here. Now I have two authentication services. I did one for Facebook and one for Google+. And what this does is this wraps the Facebook and the Google+ JavaScript library. So the first thing that we end up having to do is we're going to have to include, for Google, we're going to include the +1 JS and the client +1 scripts in here. That's going to basically give us the JavaScript library that we're going to use to interact with their API. And it'll do all the +1 stuff. And then for Facebook, we're going to include all.js for Facebook. And this basically is their full API for our app. So that's going to be the first thing that we need to include in here. So.
Why does Google require two?
Well, actually, the +1 is for authentication, and then if you want to do anything against the Google+ stuff, the client +1 is just additional stuff. Google's very good at breaking out the functionality, the unique functionality across, especially like when you get into like their maps and some of their other APIs. They've got basically a library that just covers that one little API. Like when we were doing Google Wallet, they had just one, they had just another one that you included in, and then you got all the full Google Wallet functionality. But it does increase, the number of items that you've got to add into your HTML. But, an HTML minifier will take care of that real quick. And then the other thing is that we're going to include our 2 service files here as well that we're going to go through here next. And then I've got one very simple controller here that we're going to use called login.js, which is going to give you the 2 buttons that you can log in with and then show you a result after it actually does it. We didn't get into too much. I wanted to cut out all the stuff except for the authentication piece. Yes, I do have a GitHub link that I'll put up here afterwards, so that we'll have it. But if you go to github.com/lavinjj, you'll find everything I always present out there, but I'll put it up there for you. Now, one of the things that we have to get, because I wanted to make these services reusable, is we always need an API key for Facebook. So some of my stuff is set the API key, get the API key. And then once we've logged somebody in, I want to be able to get their Facebook profile, the information that actually comes back to Facebook so I can use it elsewhere. Because this service, once we log somebody in, they're going to maintain that profile for me until they either refresh the app, right, which will reload it and they're going to have to re-authenticate again, or they shut it down. Now, we could take and store that stuff into local storage if we wanted to take this a little bit further. And actually, if you are worried about, somebody refreshing their page, it's always good to put, stuff like that probably in local storage, or at least enough information so you can go back and redo your authentication. Because I know some people will get totally upset when they're halfway through the middle of a process and then they refresh their page because they think it's taken too long, and then they've lost all their work, or they don't know where they're at and they start back over from scratch. That's probably the one thing that's probably really bad about single page applications, is you got to remember to maintain the state on the client as well as on the server. Then we've also got an access token. Now, if we're going to do anything else with the Facebook API, when that person logs into Facebook, they're going to give us back an access token that's going to basically give us the ability to go to like maybe do a post onto their Facebook page, or to look at their other stuff. So we're going to need that. And then the Facebook user ID is, I actually was using that to check against my own database on the back end to make sure I had them registered with me. So one of the things you might do is you might want to at least take some of their profile information and their Facebook ID, store that in your database as the user so that your system has a user to associate with, but that you can also link back out with Facebook or Google+. So like what we kind of do is we'll take like FB : and then whatever their Facebook user ID is, and that becomes a token that we'll use in our system, or a GP+ or a GH+ for GitHub. So that way we know where it came from, where that user came from, and we know where we got to go back to authenticate them if we need to. And in the init function, all it's really going to do is it's just going to call Facebook init or the FB init, and it's going to use the API key that is provided, and it's going to set up, whether we need to check the login status, we can set that to true, and if they're logged in, it will just ignore it. Otherwise, if we set it to false, it'll always pop up the screen, and if you aren't authorized with Facebook, it'll ask you if you want to allow the app to access it. Whether we want a cookie for server access, we'll set that to true. Since we're doing a web app, a cookie's good, because then we can make stuff and we don't have to manage too much stuff that way. And then parsing and logging. So logging is going to put stuff out to your console so you can see what's happening. You can turn that off when you go to production. And then we're going to subscribe with an internal handler here in our service to the auth response change. That means whenever the person actually does log in with Facebook or denies it, it's going to call us back in our service, and it's going to go through this method right here called auth response change handler, and he's going to parse it and say, okay, did the person connect to Facebook? Yes or no? Was it denied, not authorized? And then everything else, we're going to reject it. So what I'm going to do when they call login, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give them back a promise so that they can chain this. So it'll be like Facebook authentication .login, and then you can do .then so that you can chain this. Now, in the book, we actually used messaging back and forth because we wanted everybody in the app to know when somebody logged in and stuff like that. But for an example here where we're just doing a very thin layer, you know, a promise is the best way to handle that, and it's the smallest way. So if they fail login or they deny login, then we want to reject that promise so that we know that it failed. And then if they've actually connected, then we want to go get their profile. So we'll go to that here in a second, but here's the login method, and you'll see here we're just calling FB login, which is actually going to go call the method on the back end, which will pop up the big dialog box and say, Jim, do you want to authorize this app or not, you know, to access it? And then, you know, here we're creating the deferred promise, and we're returning it back to the user who called us. Basic, you know, basic promise stuff. And then our logout method here is just going to call logout, so you could actually log out from Facebook as well. And that, what that'll do is that'll cancel the token, and it'll also cancel the session. And then here's the Facebook profile call. And what we're doing is we're actually making an API call. But based on the URL, we're saying, give me back information about myself. /me is basically the user's profile. And then we're passing it, we're providing it a callback function, this function with response, and we're just going to save off the profile. And then we're going to resolve that promise with the profile. So whoever is waiting for that promise to be resolved will get the information. And then this is basically our API here. And we've got set API key, get API key. And basically, so that you can have a whole bunch of other methods in your service and only expose those. This is called a revealing module pattern, if you haven't seen it before, where you can have all your, it's kind of a way to do a public-private type of encapsulation in JavaScript. So what we're doing is we're only going to return back an object with those methods that we want to allow or make visible to the rest of AngularJS. So that's why you see these guys here. Like if we didn't want to provide get profile, we could actually take that out, and even though it's still in here, the other methods could call it, but nobody outside could call it. Okay, so that's the Facebook authentication. Anybody have any questions about that? Yes. Well, okay, so if I refresh the screen, again, since we're not storing the session, the credentials in the profile here in local storage or something, they would still have to go back and click log into Facebook. So now, again, this is not as robust as what you would have in production, because in production, I would do one of two things. I would either go back and call Facebook login again, you know, or I would set something in local storage or a cookie on the page so that I can survive through that refresh.
Do you have any concern about doing that when it may be a public machine?
Yeah, I have concerns about storing anything on a client machine. You know, because you never know where it's going to be. You know, you could say, I'm going to build an app that I intend to only have people use on their personal machines, but there's always somebody that's going to, they're going to use it on somebody else's machine. They're going to stay logged in, you know, and stuff like that. So sometimes it's better to look at a cookie that expires at the end of the session. That's the best thing to do. So as soon as you close the browser, the cookie's gone. As long as the browser is up and you refresh it, it'll stay around. But as soon as you kill it, so session-based cookies are probably the best thing. And that's probably about the only thing I would do. Otherwise, you know, as far as for an app.
So obviously, server-based session, you just sit there with the browser open for X minutes, and times down on the server, you lose everything. Is there any? This is outside scope. I'm sorry, but is there any equivalent for the client side in case they don't lose the browser?
Okay, so is there any, as far as timing out over a period of time? Well, what you can do is you can make the cookie, you can expire the cookie 10 minutes in the future or 5 minutes in the future. Matter of fact, people who are more, I'll say more security prone, are going to give you a cookie that's only going to last for a very short period of time. And what's going to happen is they're going to renew that cookie as long as you're interacting with the server. Matter of fact, we actually do that with our online ordering system. As long as you're interacting with us within our session timeout period, we actually renew that cookie, and then it has a time to live that's like another couple of minutes, because we're assuming somebody's going to do something within that time frame. Because usually you get on an online ordering site, and you're ordering food, you're not going to get there and sit there and wait and wait and wait. Most people get on, they order what they want to get, and they're done and they're off. Usually the people who aren't that way are the people who are ordering for a large group, and they're trying to get everybody's order together while they're doing it. And so then that's where you kind of run into that play. You've got to find a good middle ground. But I would say if you want to make sure that it expires on the client, you put a time to live. You expire that cookie. You don't have to play with what you want for the session. You might want to make it the same as your server session timeout. But what I would also do is reissue that cookie or change the time to live every time they come back to the server, so that you renew that time period.
I have a question.
Yes.
Kind of similar to a server side. Google specified a URL that it would call back, auth callback.
Yes.
So you can basically create a token on your back end for that user if you wanted it. Because right now you're getting a token on the client. Yes,
I'm only doing this client side. You're right. I can provide a callback, and it'll call back in with that. And so you can go a different route, and they'll call back in, and then basically redirect you back there with that. So you can store it on the server if you want to. Yes.
So now you've authenticated the user, and now they can do additional stuff on your site. Does this tie in anything with your server? Like, how does your server know that this user has been authenticated, or does it matter because you're assuming that? Okay, so how does the server know, your server know that he's been authenticated? The easiest way is for you to pass those credentials back to the server. And so what I've done in the past is, when I'm doing all pure client-side authentication back and forth, is once I get that token, I'll pass it back to the server, so the server can maintain it in my session. So that's where the Google callback would make.
The OAuth callback, yes. And actually I would say and I'm trying to straddle a line here, because I believe in unhosted apps, because I think the power we have today, other than maybe doing a data store, we can do everything on the client, majority. But when you are dealing and you have a server, it's always better to move authentication, authorization, and everything, even all your calculations, onto the server, and make your client as thin as possible. And that means that what you really should do is, when you say I want to authenticate with Google+, is use the OAuth callback to your server. Let your server handle the response, and then give it back to you. Because it's going to be much easier. Because what they're going to do is they're going to actually redirect your browser to your server, and then your server is going to redirect you back into the app. And that's actually what happens when, like, you do PayPal and some of these other ones. Because I originally did it with the OAuth callback the first time I went through, is that I went out, and then it redirected us to a URL on the app. The app processed it, and then redirected us to yet another page back into the app. And that was one of the first passes I did. And I said, this is really stupid if I'm just doing client side, but doing server side, it's probably the best thing to do. Is to.
So when you're saying that you should redirect the OAuth callback to the server, so basically the Google or the Facebook is just giving us an access token, right?
Yes. So.
We don't want to give that access token back to the client. We need to generate another access token and maintain an expiry on that.
Okay, so what he said, since we got people watching, so if you don't want the Google or the Facebook access token, to be given back to the client, should we generate something on the server and then give that back and expire it? And that's fine too. That's more secure, because then you don't have to worry about errant JavaScript that's going to basically maybe be looking for an OAuth callback. So you can do it. You can do that as well. And again, expire it just like we were talking about earlier. So, I mean, and a lot of people, if you'll look at some of the stuff that they've done for Express, in that they're doing authentication with Facebook and with Google via the API. So what you're doing is you're going to your server. Your server's making the authentication, it gets the token back from, from Google, from Facebook, and then returning back to you, and your Google and your server maintains it. So there's so many different ways. That's the most secure, right? Because you talk to your server talks to a third party, they do the authentication for you, and then come back. If you're dealing with like single sign-on stuff, like we were talking earlier about federated identity, what's going to happen is they're going to direct the user to that federation store. They sign in there. He's going to redirect you back to the server. It's just like the OAuth callback that we were talking for. He's going to redirect you back to the server. The server is then going to either take that information, hand onto it, and then display a page that you would then see. So there's several different ways around it. The most you're going to see is like the three prong, where you say, I want to go log in. It redirects you to somebody. They get their stuff done. They authenticate you. They send your authentication with claims of who you are, what you have privilege for, back to your server. Your server holds on to that, and then you move forward. And that's going to be the most secure. Any other questions? Okay, we'll go look at the Google one. And again, this one is pretty much exactly the same, except we don't have as many. We have some defaults here, and I have no idea what that is. So you'll notice that the client ID for my defaults are blank. That's because I'm going to force whoever's using the service to provide a client ID as part of the startup process, because again, this is supposed to be a reusable service. The person info URL, in order for me to go get the profile for the person who logs in, I've got to have a URL to go get it. This is the default, go get my profile URL. And then we were talking a little bit earlier about the access privileges that we need for this app. That's what the scope is here. So we're looking, and we want to be able to log in, and we want to be able to get the user info along with their email address. So that's going to bring back things like what you would normally see on their public profile with a little bit of extra stuff. And then the response type that I want back, which is token. So I'm going to actually I'm going to use this for my communication with Google when we do that. Now, it sends a lot of other stuff back and forth. You get this big chunk of data back when you access, so you get a bunch of results in that. So I'm going to store that off. I'm going to parse out the user info, store that off. And then I've got my deferred here, which I'm going to use for that promise I'm going to return back when we call login. So my configure method is going to basically go through an object that you pass through, and it's going to say, if I have this property, then let's update it. So if I have a if I have a client ID, it's gonna add it, is basically what it's gonna do. So it's just gonna basically populate my defaults object with whatever I pass in. And it's basically as long as he has that property on the defaults. So if you add something else in there, it's not gonna add it to the defaults. Well, you could do that. I mean, to me, it's like, why add more junk in there? Maybe somebody's trying to actually call a config and try to violate it. I may not want to. No. Matter of fact, my config, which uses a little bit. This append separator. When we start building stuff to go get the user profile on that, you end up building long URL strings. So some of this stuff in here is just to go to build those strings. So I'm not going to dig into that too much, but. Like we need to add the access token. We need to do several different things. And this is for parsing the token. So what he's going to do is he's going to go through until he can find, and he's just basically copying everything over from the OAuth token over to access results. And he's just populating that. Plus I wanted to play with has in own property and stuff like that. So you could have just merged it. I could have just assigned it to access results too. But at the time, I wasn't sure what all I wanted to come back on the OAuth token when I originally did this, because there's a lot of stuff that comes across, and some of it you need, some of you don't. And then I've got a token validation handler. What it's going to do is it's going to check to see. So what happens with the Google Plus API? If you don't authorize, it sends back null. And so what we want to do is, you know, and we need to validate our token every now and then. So what we're going to do is we're going to basically, when we call this and we call validate session, he's going to call back here. If I get a null, then I'm going to call login. If I get a token back again, then I can just go ahead and request the user info. So if you've already been logged in, all you got to do is validate the session. And that's what this guy here does, is he's going to create session parameters. He's going to take the client ID out of the defaults, and we're gonna basically get the session state from our last access results, and then we're going to call check session state. And if the user's still logged in, then it's going to basically return us back their stuff. Otherwise, we're going to log them back in again.
Another way you could do that is just broadcast logged out, logged in. This way,
Mhm.
other components can basically listen to logged out, and then you can your screen can close or whatever it is.
Correct. And that's why I favor like a message-based paradigm on large applications, is when you send a message and people are listening for it, they can deal with it a lot easier than, you know, dealing with a single promise. And then here's the login method. And again, what we're doing is we're setting up the parameters that we're going to send. So he wants Google wants the client ID or the client ID. They want to know whether you want an immediate return or you want it to pop up. We're going to say false because we want it to pop up. We're going to use response type, which was token. I think up here in the top, yeah, response token of token. So they'll give us a token back, and then the scope that we want, which is I want to have access to or the Google Plus account, and then I want to get access to their profile. And then we're going to call Google authorize, and again, you'll notice this is GAPI, which is the Google API, and then we're calling their auth library, and then the method authorize. And you'll see that a lot with the Google different SDKs. It's going to be like GAPI or Google, like with Google Maps, it's google.map. I think it's GAPI for the Google Wallet. And then we're going to basically create a deferred promise and return the promise back, so that whoever calls login, they're going to get a promise, and then they can do .then, and when we actually handle the response, in this case here, because you'll notice that I have handle response here. So that means that once the authorized method comes back, he's going to call my callback handler here, and we're going to get an OAuth token. We're going to parse it, save some stuff off so that we have it. And then if we did get an access token, we're going to go request their info. If we didn't get an access token, then we're going to basically say, hey, something happened, and we're going to call the error handler. And the user profile error handler, all it does is it rejects that promise, so it's just going to fail. Yes?
I have a general question on the documentation that you have there. Like,
yeah.
Those comments, you notice that you're using @param response. Are you using those comments for anything?
No, I was started to do that in order to generate documentation using ngdoc and that, but
what is ngdoc?
So ngdoc is basically a flavor of JSDoc, and what it does is it goes through and parses documents. If you actually go look at the AngularJS source code, you'll see tons and tons of comments in there, and they'll have all these things like @param and stuff like that, even @example. And so that's how they actually code their documentation. And then ngdoc goes through, pulls that out, reformats it, makes it real pretty, and then you get, you know, nice documentation out of it.
So you can run this on command line, or how does ngdoc?
Yeah, ngdoc it will run, actually you can run it on command line, or you can run it as a grunt task. And there's probably also a gulp task for it now too. But it follows the JSDoc guidelines. Okay, so if everything is successful, we're going to call request user profile, which is down here. And so what we're going to do is we're going to call build user profile URL, and that's where it's going to do that big long string I had plus the access token and that, and give us back a URL. And then we're basically going to call that with the HTTP handler and wait for it to come back. And it's either going to come back with a success handler, or it's going to come back with an error if it fails. And if we get success, then we actually the data is going to contain, the data on the response is going to contain the user profile from Google, for Google+. Then we store it off, and then we resolve the promise, and we're done. And then I have some, little minor getters. I can get the user profile and get the access token if I need to make other calls to the API. And then again, we're using this same, revealing module pattern where we're hiding everything. But, if you notice, there was a whole bunch of other stuff here, right? All we're exposing here is configure, login, get user profile, get access token. So here's another good example where we're encapsulating and hiding some of the functionality to the outside world. Now, I did talk a little bit about we have to do some configuration, right? So the first thing we're going to have to do is, and I need to go get, this is my old one from yesterday, so I need to go kill it. Now you'll notice something a little bit different here, and this is actually pulled over from the app out of the book. If I wanted to access the person's calendar and the task, you'll notice here that there's auth task, auth calendars, or auth calendar. So this gives me access that I can actually read their calendar. I can create new calendars for them. I can add appointments to their calendar. Same way with task. I can create tasks into their task list. Yes? Yeah, you'll see it here in a minute because I'm going to go switch out the client IDs to the new apps that we just created, so you'll see the big pop-up.
Is it accept all use this app, or can you decline certain things?
I think you can decline certain things as well. Matter of fact, I think there's little check boxes next to it. Actually, last night I made sure everything ran, but I hadn't killed my authorization to the app, so it just popped up, went away, and I didn't see. But we'll look at it here in a second. So let's go over here, and here's my. Remember, we created these apps a long time ago, right? Now we're ready to use them. So the first thing we need from Facebook is going to be the app ID. So, and I don't care if you see this because I'm going to delete the app right after this. So it won't be of much use to you. So it's what I did with everything that was published in the book too. I went out and deleted that and recreated other projects. So okay, so there's my Facebook app ID or client ID. Now let's go over here to and let's get the client ID for my Google app. Again, I'll be killing it anyway after we're done here. So now that I have that, and probably somebody's already hacked my app while we were sitting here talking, so it doesn't really matter. So what this does is we created a run module in the Bootstrap, right? And so what's happening is as Angular starts genning things up, he goes through and he does all the configs first, right? And then he does all the runs second. So what's going to happen is he's going to say, okay, here's a run module, and we're going to tell the Facebook authentication service, here's your client ID, please initialize. And then we're going to go to the Google plus authentication, say, here's your client ID, and here's the scope that I want access to. So that'll be all ready so that when we actually get the app up and running and we click on one of those two buttons, they'll be ready to go. We won't have to wait for it or anything. So we're kind of preloading and getting this stuff going. Now let's, yes.
When you create the Angular.module in our apps, we're used to doing the don't run, just that runs into each other. Is it because this creates separate scope for the different functions, the way that you syntax it?
No, the way I did it here was to kind of just break everything apart. Yes. So yes, a lot of times you'll see people chain .run, .config, and stuff like that, one right after the other. What I did here is I just went back to just old school. I wanted to make everything separate, so that's why I didn't chain them one after the other. So, but no, it has nothing to do with scope. Matter of fact, if you actually look at the module, there's it's the same, right? So we're actually instantiating the same module. We're just make it a little bit simpler on the code. It's more direct. Everybody can see that he's calling this module, do a config, this module, do a run. That's the only reason I'm doing it. That's correct. So, since there is no second argument, like we see on the very first line here, it is a get on the module. It is, when you see the first one up there, the very first line there on line 1, that's a creator, right? It's going to create a new module. If you have problems and it says, I cannot find this service or I can't find that controller, look in your code, because probably what has happened is you've defined it with a comma with square brackets after it, and you've wiped out everything that came before that. So you always want to make sure that when you're defining, when you only want to do this section here, right? Line 1, once. Only do that once.
Or just the array one.
Yeah, well, you only want to do it with comma array once. Yeah, everything else should be without the second parameter. If you don't do it, if this way here, what Angular does is it will go up, it'll look for it, it'll bring back that module, and then it will execute those methods using that module scope.
This becomes more beneficial when you're separating into multiple files.
Yes, it does. Now, when Angular first got started a couple of years ago, you saw people creating a global scope that would be my app dot, application dot this, and we have that code all over the place as well. So we created different modules. So we created a separate module for all the directives, a separate module for all the services, separate module for all the partials, and it really gets down to what your development group likes best. I like stuff, everything in a place, all the services in one project, all the directives in another process, all the partials in another one. And well, and if you notice here, we're doing it by function under service, right? So I'm still doing type and then all the Facebook stuff in one and that the other.
I separate custom terms from actual custom terms are like auth, cache,
Yep.
storage, and then our actual functionality components like survey module, online ordering module, and those are modules itself.
Yeah, matter of fact, that's the best thing to do is put all your cross components in one module by itself. All your logging, and even your data stuff might even go into one login unless you need it broken out. But that becomes a very religious debate. And I did write a blog post called AngularJS Modules for Great Justice, and I got good reviews and bad reviews. So some people were all the controllers go in one folder, and all the parcels and all the HTML goes in another folder. But that's okay. Everybody's entitled to their own opinion, and especially when they're running their own dev shop, right? Okay, so this is the partial for the login controller. So this is going to be the only screen you guys are going to see tonight. So what we're doing is I've got two buttons or two images. One that says login with Google Plus, and the other one that says login with Facebook. And each one of those have a method. Login with Google Plus or login with Facebook. Now, the controller is very, very simple. Again, the whole ideal is to show you guys, the authentication back and forth, the basics. So we've got login with Google Plus, and he's going to basically call the service that we just went over .login, and then when that comes back, we're going to call handle Google Plus login, which we're expecting the user profile to come in, and then I'm going to take that and format it into a display name and pop that up on the screen. And probably they'll hack my account as soon as they know my Google Plus ID. Same thing with Facebook, right? We're going to call the Facebook service that we wrote that wraps the Facebook JavaScript .login, and then when that returns back, then we're going to go parse the user and display that up on the screen. So it's a very simple little program here. So now let's go in and let's do a grunt serve. Oh, what do you mean it's not here? Oh yeah, you're right. Must have been for me playing around. There we go. So now let's see, where did I put? So let's go to localhost 9001. There we go. You can see that, and it's funny because I use the CG-Angular app generator, And it does everything at 9001. I don't know why, but no, I want to go up. There we
You
go.
just write, well, however you want to do this, but write the response to the body. Because right now you just explained the ID.
I could, yeah.
This way we could see if you decline Google Plus, what's the difference in data.
Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually, we're going to jump back and forth. So let me, let's see if I can, I don't, see, here's the thing, you guys can't really see the source code, which always drives me nuts. But, so let's start with Google Plus, right? We'll do that first. So we want to get the profile handler, and we'll stop here for request user info, and we'll look at login here real quick. So we'll go ahead and we'll click this guy. So basically .login got called. If we look at our call stack here, you'll see that login.js, is where it called Google Plus Authentication Service. Well, there's got to be a way. What is it, Control Plus or something? Yeah, at least on Windows, but not on my Mac. Command Plus, maybe it is. Thank you. Now, can you guys see it much better? Okay. So that's where we're, and so it basically we're right here now. So we're going to walk through our parameters. And if we want to see, here's our defaults. You'll see there's the client ID, there's our URL and our scope, which was set, and now if you notice that we had started off with just 2, there's 4 in here. So that init actually happened. So we're going to go ahead and we're just going to go ahead and click that through. Oh, it says invalid client ID. Uh-oh. I must not have typed it in right. There's one thing to check. Okay, so let's go back over here. Localhost 9001, right? Let's do it the easy way. We'll get it right this time. Shh, you didn't see this. Wait, that's the client email. That's not what we want. There it is. Like I said, it'll be dead. It'll be gone. Okay, where's Mr. App.js? Let's put it back here. Looks to be right. But let's see what happens now. I wonder if oh, you know what? I probably got to do is /login. Let's see real quick. Oh, he doesn't like that. It should just be this. Yeah. Oh, it's the scopes. We need to get rid of those extra scopes. It says you didn't ask for email and you didn't ask for, all you asked for was for login. All right. Yeah. No support email.
Just sign out, maybe.
Sorry, so something else new they've
Yeah.
added to their.
Well, I probably should go back and look at my other one. So here we'll look at Facebook. So right now, you'll see that it pops up and it says, so Jim's sample auth app wants to access it. We're going to say cancel for right now, and then we'll go over here to Facebook, and then so we can set this stuff in here so that you guys can see it. Let's see, where's login at? Here's the login. There's getting the profile. So let's go back and click it again. So we're doing our login. You'll see it comes up and it says, okay. So in the case of this, we don't have enough privileges to post to Facebook. If you notice, it says this does not let the app post to profile. It just says it'll receive the following info, your public profile. So you can add more stuff to Facebook. And in my book, we go in all the different things you can add to it. So we're going to say, okay, I want to allow them access. I don't know who this Jim sample auth app guy is, but we'll let them access. So now we get back and we're getting ready to go, and I want to set a breakpoint on 71 here so that when we get the response, and let's go over here to login and set a breakpoint here. So now I've gotten a response, and you can see, you know, it's got my credential, my ID from Facebook, my link, my locale, my name. There's all sorts of stuff in here. The updated time, whether I'm a verified user. And so we're going to resolve that. And now that that resolved, you know, the then came back and he called handle Facebook login, and I got the same information here. So we're going to go ahead and say, yep, let it go. And if we look down here, you'll see welcome Jim Lavin with my Facebook ID. So let me go back, and I'm going to change commands here. Let's see. I want to go grab one. Since I'm probably missing a scope. So let me go open up my stuff from the Brew Everywhere app here. And where's my Jim Lavin thing at? Yeah, I know. They hacked me already. Oh, no. Let's see. Where's projects at? I'm just going to grab everything from app.js out of here for Google.
And this is the project that's in your services book, right?
Yes, this is the project that's in my services book. And I just realized that I have to go out and pull it from. And that. Now let's go back over here, go to my projects, and I'll just grab this one here. What I want to look is what are the APIs that I have here, right? So I have name, drive, Google Plus, and tasks. That should have been it. So let's just go ahead and I'll grab the credentials from this. Again, this is another sample app. So we'll grab this guy right here. And we'll put him here.
Is that sample app pointing to localhost also?
It is pointing to localhost, yes. If we go back, you'll see that, yeah. So let's go back over here and, well, it actually have live reload going on in the background. So now I'm already logged in to this app, so it automatically didn't pop it up. You saw it go up and flash. But here's my response back. And if we look at my data, you'll see here's my here's all my data here. So we'll go ahead and let's go back over here to login.js and handle this, and then we'll look at what it pops up because so again, here's the user object. You know, it's got it's got quite a bit more information than the Facebook object has in it. It's got an image, so I could see myself if I want to pull down the image or whatever. Okay, so we're going to let that go. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back over here, and I'm going to, let's see, I want to browse this guest. What I want to do is I want to, come on, where are you at? I want to go to my account, and then we're going to go to security. Let's see. Where's it at? There should be apps. Okay, here we go. Account permissions. So what I want to do is, you see this Brew Everywhere app? I'm going to revoke access on that. So that what we just logged in from Google Plus is now gonna, the next time it's gonna pop up everything. So when we come back over here, let's refresh the page. So I've lost all my status and everything. And I click on this, and we're gonna go ahead and we're just gonna kick this off. Now I get it, and you'll see that it says, okay, it wants to know your basic profile information, and let's see, this is command plus plus plus, right? Thank you. So this is what we're going to give. So you can, and you change this. See, I can say, I don't want to give them access to my inbox, you know. So you could say, no, he doesn't get access to my circles. You know. Yeah, and then allow, you know, this app will send information about your activities from this app to Google. And I can send it to my circles, or I can say, just send it to me, you know. But that's about it. Everything else, view your email, that's just view, right? Now, if I hit cancel, what should happen? Let's go back over here, because what we want to do is we want to get into the error profiler, right? In this case, nothing will happen. Oh, I got to find that tab now. No. Or is it request for permission, right? If I say cancel, then I should end up here. Nope. I guess I did. I just didn't see it. Where are we at? It looks like he left. So let's kick it again. So we'll go ahead and we'll accept this time, and now I'm back in our success handler again. So that's pretty much, you know, it in a nutshell. Now, this is the tip of the iceberg type of thing. You can take this much deeper, and there are some other libraries. What I found, you know, once I get into playing with it, the documentation is very good on both sites. And if you start looking at GitHub and some of the other ones, they've got quite a bit as well. So I think that's about it. Does anybody have any questions about anything? I know what it was. If somebody wanted to know where this was, let's go to GitHub and third-party auth. So that's basically lavinjj/third-party auth on GitHub. And that's actually everything in there. You'll have to go out, create your own apps for Facebook and Google Plus, and then supply those. If you run into problems or you got questions, you can contact me through the Meetup forums, you know, or email me through there. Probably so, yeah. Yes, go ahead. Actually, what I'm going to do when I'm developing a new app, I'm going to grab and I'm going to run with whatever I'm the most comfortable with and I'm the most confident with. Because especially in the business world, you're really paid to do results, right? Now, if you're, so there's that, you have to take that frame. If this is for work and I got to get it done, run with what you know best, right? And if that's server-side development with JavaScript on the front end to do stuff, then do that. But if this is green, you know, this is a brand new app and there's nothing there, and you have the time, then I would say pick what you feel that the direction is that everybody's going with. Back 2.5 years ago when we picked AngularJS for our apps, I mean, I was like, I know single page applications are a big thing, and I had spent 6 months with what was the kick one? Knockout, and started looking at Durandal, which, you know, had 5-6 different other libraries that were wrapped around it, and then you had Ember and you had Backbone, and it was just, and I saw this and I was looking at it and I said, this is so easy that, you know, even my web people could do it. And because I mean, the way that, because we had people that, I mean, they were great with CSS and, you know, and HTML, but they were not very strong with JavaScript. They hacked. I'll put it that way. They hacked and they made their way through and they did a lot of great stuff. But when you want to try to take and change things, that made it a lot easier. And we took and we redid the entire front end in 3 months. And that was with nobody knowing anything. But we also had a little bit more of luxury that we could fail because we had a 6-month project, but we were so excited about doing it, you know, we knocked out the front end in 3 months. So that doesn't happen to us today now because everybody expects too much from us. Now we're usually banging our knees. But really it is up to, you know, where you're at. I mean, I love to embrace new technology. I mean, I'm already looking at ES6 in AngularJS using 1.3. I'm also looking at Aurelia, which is, you know, the new, what was his name, Robert? I can't remember the guy who left Angular. Yeah, Robert Eisenberg, who used to run Durango. He's now come up with a whole new thing that's integrating, you know, web components, ES6, you know. So to me, I'm always looking for the next technology thing. But as if I was going to do my bet today on, I've got a business app I got to get done, I'm probably going to stick with what I know best. Yeah. Right. Yeah, I am. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah. Yeah, and I probably would do that again, since this is so the big thing is there are a lot of server libraries that are going to do that, like with ASP.NET, they've already got all that built in. So all I've got to do is post back the data. They'll create the token for me and all the authentication there too. And they also have a bunch of third-party OAuth libraries that will do that for me, just like the passport stuff with Node. To me, the reason I did client-side is I also look at where the computing power is going nowadays. And if you look about it, a web page is underutilized. And I don't know if you've ever looked at any of the unhosted stuff that they're coming out with, where people are basically your whole app and everything, you put it on a server just to kickstart it, then you connect to your own personal data stores for your data, or you go pull data from different services. But the thing is that your application doesn't live on one server. And that's why some of these, I do it this way. But really from a business perspective, I think doing stuff on the server side is probably the best thing to do. But, you know, so yeah, I would agree. If I was in a Node environment, I would just go ahead and use, you know, I would use those libraries there. I would not do this. Yeah, no. Your local storage off of this machine and copy it to that machine, right? So you do have to have some place for it to reside, and that would be the cloud. You know, I don't want that data to go reside in somebody else's, you know, somebody else's database. I want to keep that stuff myself. So I want my own personal data store, right? And I can host that own server that I'm hosting, and I authenticate with that. And once I authenticate with that, then my data's there. Another way is using Dropbox storage, right? You can log into Dropbox, and then I can read and write files all day long from the client side to Dropbox. And then when you close down that thing, I can go back to my Windows box or to my MacBook, and I can pull those up in another app if I want to. So so to me, that's where, if you want to get away from the fact that you've always got to be tied to a server, that's kind of why I lean a little bit more. Credit card processing, everything else that we do, and that's all done on the back end. And I don't care if you change the price of something, in our JavaScript, you send it back, we're going to reprice it because we do all the pricing on the back end. There's no way you're going to get, a bunch of sandwiches from one of our clients for free, unless they're giving them away for free. So, but yes, I mean, the other thing that doing things client side make you think about implementation, because granted, if I was to sit here and hash the password when you type in your password and send it to the back, that's not really a good thing to do because somebody could watch it. But it gets you familiar with those practices. Yes. No, that's correct. And actually, games and even online ordering, other than pushing the order to the server, you don't really care what's going on the client side that much. And so there's probably a lot. But the other thing is this is a good way to give you an example, because you could take what we've done here, you could put that in Node.js library just as easy and run it from Node.js. But he's right. If first of all, find a library that does it. Does whatever you're doing, whether it's authentication against a whole bunch of other backends, like he's talking about Passport, or if you're doing something with, I'm trying to think of some of the other things, credit card processing. There's a friggin' library out there for, I mean, there's tons of libraries. First and foremost, use the modular approach, which is find it, look and see what's going to work best for you, use it. Don't recreate the wheel, not unless you have to, or you just want to do it because you want the practice of doing it.
There is the caveat. You want to make sure that you actually really know what that module is doing.
Yes, you do.
I trust it, but not that.
Well, let's put it this way. I got tired of writing credit card processing code, and I trust the libraries that I'm working on because they're PCI compliant. I know they're PCI compliant. I know my stuff running across them is PCI compliant. But for the longest time, it took a good 7 or 8 years to get our shop out of that mind frame, because they wanted to create their own library for every card processor we integrated with, which was stupid.
Not invented here.
Yep. Okay, that's it for tonight. Now